Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Tim Bratz with me. He is the founder of Legacy Wealth Holdings, and one of the things that I think you are going to hear in our story, in our conversation today, is even when things get tough, if you believe in the mission and you're passionate about what you're doing, you're willing to work through those hard moments to get to where you want to go. So, Tim, thanks so much for being on today.
Yeah, Phil, appreciate the invite, man. Excited to be here.
You bet. So growing up, just talking a little bit about, examples we have in our life. You talked about how your dad had like a side business. And so you started to see a little bit of kind of what entrepreneurship looked like. So talk, a bit about growing up, seeing that as an example from an early age.
Yeah, man. Well, I don't know. I guess I've always been interested, I guess, in money
Yeah.
and the concept of having money and those kinds of things. Always kind of, I don't know, early on it was because of the material type stuff that I thought I could buy. Now it's more because of the impact and things that you can do with it. But I've always been interested in money, so I kind of like paid attention to what my dad was doing, what other people did. I always thought I wanted to be a doctor or an attorney or something white collar like that. And my dad was a cop, right? I came from a blue collar family. My mom had a teaching degree and my dad was a policeman. So it doesn't get more blue collar than that. We're from suburban Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio. And uh, yeah, growing up, I saw my dad working as a full-time police officer. And but he had this part-time business that really paid for the lifestyle type of expenses, the vacations and making sure my brothers had a car when they turned 16 and paying for college, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at this. My dad, my parents, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, that whole thing. And I was like, well, Dad, like, what? You have this business, it's a part-time business,
Yeah.
not knowing anything really about business. I just asked a simple kid question of like, if you make more or just as much money in your part-time business as you do in your full-time job, could you make more money if you quit your full-time job and just went
Yeah.
all in on your business? Right. That was simple math to me. And he's like, well, I got these four crazy kids. You're one of them, Tim. And I got to pay for school. I got to do this, and we need health insurance and all these other
Yeah.
expenses. So, but the concept of realizing that the business is what paid for the activities, the lifestyle, and listen, it was a blue collar lifestyle, but we were able to go on trips and we were able to have a nice home, and we
Yeah.
never there was never need or want, right, for other things, and it wasn't extravagant by any means, but it was not being stressed about money because my dad had this part-time business. And I realized that and I recognized that, and I kept on thinking like, you know, I want to own a business. Like that's my thing, but I didn't know what an industry or which industry. And I saw my dad. My dad's was in security and like personnel security for
Yeah.
factories and foundries and apartment buildings and hospitals and things like that. And when I was going through college, '03 to '07, I saw everybody making money in real estate. And I remember thinking, meeting people who were not that bright, who were making a lot of money in real estate, and thinking, if this person's making money, I'm going to get rich doing this, because
Yes.
anybody who could fog a mirror could make money in real estate back at '03 to '07 when I was in college. And so I decided to kind of lean towards that real estate side of things and just realize, you can be in a race car or in a race, right? And I could be in a Ferrari and you could be in a Ford Pinto and we could be driving down the street and I'm going to win,
Yeah.
not because I'm better, right? Just because I'm in a better vehicle. And
Mm.
if we stopped at the next stoplight and we got out and I got in the Ford Pinto and you got in the Ferrari, you would beat me because you're in the better vehicle. And I quickly realized that real estate was not an experiment. It's not some tech startup. It's not some um, unproven model or mode to build wealth. I just liked that real estate was time proven, time tested, and it was a better financial vehicle to get to where you were going. And so I leaned in on that vehicle and focused on real estate as soon as I graduated from college.
Yes. So before we get to there, I think one comment that I hear from, your dad's conversation with you is, there's inherent risk in being your own boss, right? Now, there's also risk in being an employee of something, right? Because you don't
Very much
have the
so.
full control, but there's a different type of risk that becomes when you're the business owner. And you were quickly turned off to the idea of being an employee when you had a job in high school and you were supposed to be heading to a baseball game, and an altercation presumes between you and the business owner. So talk just a little bit about that, younger moment that was like, all right, maybe business ownership is going to be the way I want to go.
Yeah, I was always a little bit entrepreneurial, right? Like I had money in high school to go out on the weekends, and not I never really had a job. Like I did have a job, I guess, a little bit later on, but I always made money from like cutting my buddy's hair, right? And I'd cut everybody's hair in high school, and I'd make $5 to $10 per haircut. Or I like, this is back in the day of mixed CDs, right?
Yeah.
So I'd download songs on Napster and Audio Galaxy and stuff, and make a mix CD for somebody and sell it to them for $5. They give a list of all the songs that they wanted, and then I make that. So it was like a little bit entrepreneurial in that regard. And I didn't like being told what to do. I was always the one who created the plans on the weekends. What's everybody doing? Nobody had plans unless I organized them.
Yeah.
And so I had a little bit of that inside of me. So when I went to college, I knew I wanted to get involved in the financial side. I actually interned with a financial advisor, right, one summer.
Yeah.
And they couldn't really pay me. I was able to learn, but I went and got a job, right? And so that's another kind of little bit of a lesson is sometimes, a lot of people like expect to be compensated for their time and for their value. And the reality is like, I don't care about the value that you are. I care about the value that you add. The value that you add will dictate what the market can pay you. But for me, I wasn't looking to just make money from that financial internship or job. I wanted to learn, and I was investing in my future, right? I was sacrificing current circumstances and making money in order to make an investment in my future. And there's a lot of people who don't get that, right? They want to be compensated for $1 immediate or compensated for their work immediately. I was always willing to get paid less or get paid nothing in order to invest in my future. And so that's a big takeaway for anybody who's like getting started. But what I did, because they couldn't pay me and I still had expenses, right? I had to put gas in the car and pay for Chipotle burritos and things like that. I went and worked for a company that did essentially events and like rentals and stuff like that, event rental type stuff, supplies and those kinds of things. And when I was working with this company, who organized my co-ed softball league and team and stuff that summer as well. And I was just that person. And I went to work, and I was supposed to work, it was Saturday or something, supposed to work from 8 to 1. And I had a game at like 7 p.m. that night. And so I was supposed to work from 8 to 1. 1 o'clock rolls around. They asked me to keep on working later. I worked till 3. And then it's like 4:15 or something. And I'm like, I got to get going. And they wanted to send me out that I wouldn't get back till like 8 p.m. And I was like, sir, I came in early. All right. I stayed later than I'm supposed to, many hours later than I'm supposed to. I can work here until about that 5:45, 6 o'clock range. And then I got to get home, get changed, get to my game. I'm the captain of the team. It's my team. And I got to be there. And he friggin' berates me. He's like, are you kidding me? You want me to put my business on hold because and you want to go play a baseball game? I was like, this is not for me, sir. Like I made it over. I overcommitted to you. Yes. I've gone above and beyond what you asked me. And, your lack of preparation and your lack of planning does not constitute an emergency on my side. And I decided, I was like, hey, this is not for me. And I left. And I was the best friggin' worker there too, right? Like, cause I'm showing up early, I'm staying late. I never bitch or complain. I'm the most responsible person to make sure things get done and all these things. And just like there's lessons from good mentors in your life, there's lessons from bad mentors in your life. The bosses I don't want to be like, how I didn't want to treat my employees once I would eventually have them. And you learn these things along the way. And you can take and pick and choose things from good mentors, but you don't have to take everything from that mentor, right? Like I would take financial advice from Donald Trump, but I would not take relationship advice from Donald Trump, right?
Right.
Like there's things like that where you
Yeah.
pick and choose, and you get an idea of taking the things that you like, leaving the things that you don't. But you need to be able to think, right? You need to be able to make those decisions. You need to be able to decipher through that information.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson learned from that guy. So I quickly realized I'm not a really good employee, but I was willing to continue getting educated. And it's funny, like 2 or 3 years after that, I took all my friends were in this or a bunch of them, not all my friends, but several of them got into like the pharmaceutical sales, and they're making $100,000 or 90,000, close to 100 grand a year
Yeah.
out of school. And I was like, that's what I want to be doing, right? In order to start making 100 grand a year. And I took a behavioral assessment, and it was essentially of like, do you follow rules? Can you follow a format? Can you follow a plan? And I'm thinking, hey, I was a great student, and I was in all these academic things, and I was sociable and all this other stuff. I'm thinking this is a shoe-in, right? And I failed the behavioral assessment because I can't follow directions. And that's when I realized I need to own my own business, because I don't do well with people telling me what to do, and decided the only way I can get away with that is if I jump and start my own business. And fortunately, it's worked out.
Yes. So, well, one thing I want to highlight as we progress on is exactly what you just said there. And I think that is, oftentimes we'll have people we really respect in our lives give us feedback in areas that they're not well equipped in. Right. But it's like,
just because you're good at making money doesn't mean you're a good, I don't know, moral compass of what I should be doing with my life.
Yeah, exactly right. And, I think sometimes you say, well, I really trust my parents' opinion. And it's like, but if your parents have never run a business, probably not the best people to go to get business advice, even though they're people that, you trust a bunch. It's like their feedback may not align with what someone that has expertise in that area go with. But oftentimes we will listen to those insights, even though it may not be, beneficial information or knowledge for us.
Yeah. Understanding the lens that somebody else is trying to give you, advice through is really important. And that comes with emotional intelligence, and I would say that that's probably one of those things, the most successful people I know in life, right? They have influence, they're well liked, they are successful in their business, or they're successful in really, like, it's because they have emotional intelligence and social intelligence and self-awareness, like those kinds of social awareness, self-awareness. That combination, or that key skill set, is what's really differentiated a lot of people that are successful versus not successful, people that I like to hang out with versus people I don't like to hang out with. It's that personal awareness and understanding, what kind of lens are is the person you're talking to seeing the world through, or giving you that insight through, or giving you that advice through. And then you can better decipher the information, and then again, take what you want, leave what you don't. And it allows you to just kind of make better decisions that way.
That's awesome. I love it. So as you mentioned, you graduate college and you go ahead, and your brother's living in New York. So you head out there to start in real estate, but you start in real estate in the selling and leasing side of real estate, not in purchasing right away. So talk about getting started in real estate in what, 07, 08. I'm sure that's an interesting dynamic and time to get into the business.
Yeah. So I graduated college in 07. My brother was living in New York. I ended up moving out there, like you said. And I think a lot of people don't realize, especially if you don't come from the real estate investing side, you just think like, okay, I either go work for somebody who is a developer or investor, or I become a realtor. And that's like how you get involved in real estate. That's still what a lot of people think who aren't involved in real estate investing, or in that world. And so that's what I thought. And so I got my real estate license in New York City. And for some reason, I parked it with a commercial real estate brokerage, not like a residential brokerage where you help somebody, find their home or sell their home. Instead, I would represent a landlord or a business owner who had retail or office space and help them market that space, or I'd represent a business owner that was looking for another location, looking to expand, looking to create a business in either retail or office space. And so that really opened my eyes to the world of investing, because I brokered a lease And it wasn't like somebody who was buying their house and it's like, oh, it's my house and I'm going to pay for it for my job. It was, I broker a lease to a business. And my first one was like a 400 square foot space on a side street in Greenwich Village, New York City. And it was 400 square feet. And the lease was $10,000 a month. And this is one of 8 retail spaces. And there were probably 10 or 15 stories of apartments above it. And I get to like doing the math. And I'm like, this landlord is going to make millions of dollars over the next 12 years over the lease term of this, and for doing something one time. And plus you compound all the other retail spaces that were all much bigger than this one, and all the apartments that he rented out above it. And I'm like, this is how wealth is created. This is the real estate wealth that people have been talking about. Residual income. Right. And I confused residual with passive back at the time. And most people still do, right? They're two very different things. Correct. Passive income, still looking for it. Still haven't found true passive income. Residual income is a very serious thing, but even passive income, you need to actively underwrite a deal and invest and babysit it and all those things. But residual income is doing something once and getting paid on it over and over and over again and letting that compound. And how many times can you go do a residual income producing activity and allow all of that to compound? And that's what this landlord was doing. He had dozens, if not hundreds of apartments and retail spaces, and ended up renting them out one time. And then that tenant would pay rent every single month for years and years on end. And you have not just money, but you have time, you know, when you find those residual income producing assets. Yes. And that's where I wanted to be.
Yes. So in New York, though, real estate is a very expensive commodity to buy. And so you said, well, maybe this isn't the best spot for me to get started. And you moved to South Carolina, which is still expensive, but different than New York expensive. So talk a little bit about making that move and why you ended up picking South Carolina to go to next.
Yeah, very different 15 years ago than it is today. You know, it wasn't nearly as expensive as it is today. But yeah, I went to Charleston. It was really just a lifestyle type of a movement of wanting to get into some warm weather, but still be drivable back to Ohio and New York, where my family was. And so I moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and I went through the stage that a lot of people go through, which is like analysis paralysis of reading all the books and listening to all the gurus and attending the courses and spending money on my credit card that I didn't really have in order to pay for mentorship and other courses and all that stuff. And you know, try to learn everything before I ever did anything. Yes. And that's good in theory, but doesn't work in practicality of like, you have to be doing both. You have to be getting educated and taking action at all times, right? Doing both of them all the time and learning a little bit from other people, learning a little bit from reading books, learning a little bit from taking courses, and at the same time implementing that knowledge in real world action, having a little bit of that street smart and school of hard knocks that comes with it. If you just take action all the time, dude, you're going to be getting kicked in the crotch like I did for a decade before you're ever any good, versus always reading about it in a book, but never taking and implementing any of that action. You never get ahead. So you need to be doing both of them at all times, right? You can't learn how to swim by reading about it in a book. And at the same time, there's certain things and techniques that you need to learn from other people before you get in the water. And so real estate's very, very similar to that. And so this is, fall of 2008, I'm ready to make the move and jump in and actually take action. And then just headlines everywhere of Lehman Brothers out of business, Bear Stearns out of business, real estate's the culprit. It's all real estate's fault. And I was like, damn, I just, showed up to the party and everybody's running out the back door because the cops already busted the gun, I was like, oh man. And but what was interesting is like I didn't take out any stated income loans or no doc loans and put a bunch of things on my credit that I couldn't afford. Like the timing wise, it was a blessing because I didn't do something stupid. If I was a year ahead, I would have done something stupid, not been prepared, not had the wisdom that I saw and or learned the wisdom from what I saw. And it was very fortunate because prices just cratered and went to the bottom, and there were deals everywhere. Very different than today's market where there was just so much supply on the marketplace of houses that you could buy for under $100,000 in almost every market.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh my goodness. The problem was I didn't have access to money, and I didn't know how to raise money, and I never had any experience. I'd never done a deal before, and everybody's saying run from real estate.
Yeah.
And I was 23 years old. And so nobody was going to invest with me. So I just started creatively financing things. I started raising private money. I started asking about seller financing, and I started structuring deals creatively, which allowed me to then get into projects that I couldn't have gotten into previously or with a traditional loan. And didn't know it at the time, but that was one of those constraints that was put on me that seemed very difficult and seemed like a setback, but was really a setup for things better in the future, which allowed me to then learn these skill sets that as the market heated up and as all these other things happened and COVID hits and weird, corrections in the market occur, I was able to then utilize a lot of those strategies I learned early on that I didn't need for many, many years in doing real estate, and then re-implement those into creatively structuring real estate deals to the point where I bought my oceanfront home in Charleston, South Carolina on seller financing and raising private money, where I used none of my own credit, none of my own money in order to buy an oceanfront home, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with when I bought a 12,000 square foot mountain estate on 53 acres in North Carolina in the Smokies, using none of my own money, using none of my own credit, because I knew those strategies. And then I bought an island the same way, using none of my own money, none of my own credit, seller financing, syndicated it the same way that I do my apartments, and building it out to be an event type of a venue. But I own a 100-acre island in South Carolina now. So like, I would never be able to do those things if I didn't learn those skills early on and be able to then execute swiftly when the market and opportunities did present themselves.
I love it. So to highlight a part of what you said there, that idea of a paralysis analysis, right? And just, hey, overthinking, right? Overcomplicating. You got in at 23. I bought my first property at 22. And I always tell people I was probably just too naive or too dumb to ask certain questions. Mm-hmm. So there were certain risks that like inherently were there, but I just wasn't concerned about because I just didn't even think to ask it. And it worked out over time. And so I think it's finding that balance, right? To your point, you don't want to get into something and not really understand, the risks involved or, what the strategy is. And at the same token, if you're waiting until you have all the answers, you're going to miss the opportunity, or you're never actually going to take the action because you'll never have all of the answers. It's constantly a learning game. So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that. I think you highlighted it well, but
no, I think it's one of those, everybody wants a perfect deal. And I can assure you, after doing thousands of deals over, I've been in the real estate industry since 2005, investing since 2008, 9.
Yeah.
So I've been investing for 15 years. I've been in the industry for 20 years almost.
Yeah.
And the reality is there's no perfect deal. There's always hair on a deal somewhere, somehow. And if you wait for a perfect deal, you will never get ahead. You'll be waiting. I would have been waiting for 20 years, right? And I still haven't found a perfect deal. And so home runs don't necessarily exist, right? And baseball games aren't won by home runs. They're won by base hits. It's just continuously swinging the bat, getting on base, getting a good deal, not a perfect deal. And then another good deal, and not a perfect deal, and another good deal. And you hit enough good deals, eventually it starts compounding and runs start being scored. And all of a sudden you start winning. And that's what wins baseball games. And the same thing is done through real estate investing. Is you have to be just swinging the bat all the time, always making offers, always working on raising private money, taking down a good deal. I don't get greedy over a deal. Could I beat up sellers a little bit more if they're in a really desperate position and get an extra $20,000 of upside? Yeah, I probably could, but I don't. Right? Because one, I believe in karma, and two, I just don't need to, because I'm playing the long game. I'm not trying to get rich quick. I'm trying to build wealth, legacy wealth over time. And so I'm just looking at base hits, and I want good deals after good deal after good deal after good deal. And you know what happens is a lot of times you think you got a home run that ends up turning into a strikeout. And that's happened multiple times across too good to be true deals that end up being that way. So be careful on that stuff and just take action. Just start, buying good deals and staying active in that space. And eventually you're going to find yourself way ahead of the curve and see the compound effect set in, where you find yourself hey, I thought I'd hit my goals a little bit sooner. Yeah, you think about that in the first 12, 24 months. And then all of a sudden the compound effect sets in and you will way exceed your goals within the next 3 to 5 years if you just keep your head down and keep working at it.
I love it. So for you, talking about, goals, you build the real estate business to about 10 properties, and then a new opportunity presents itself and you say, well, maybe it's time to explore a new opportunity and, transition from real estate. So talk about, what intrigued you and, making that decision to get out of something that you've been so passionate about getting into, and how that played out.
Yeah, well, I think it's naivety, right? And so over the next 2 years from 23 to 25, I accumulated 10 single family homes, including my own primary residence,
Yeah.
which I house hacked, which means I rented out the bedrooms to a couple of my buddies. And then I lived there. My buddies paid me rent and paid majority of my mortgage and their share of utilities and stuff. So at the age of 25, I found myself in a position where these 9 rentals plus my own primary residence generated enough residual income on a monthly basis that exceeded the operating expenses, the debt service, and living expenses that I had personally in my life. And so it paid for the business, it paid for my personal, and it put me in a position where I wasn't rich, but I was financially free, right? If you define that by residual income exceeding your residual expenses, I guess. Mm-hmm. And there's a level of arrogance that comes in your 20s too, especially when you're financially free at 25. And so I think I've got the Midas touch and I can just go and hit on different businesses and be successful anywhere that I go. And so I started thinking the grass is greener on the other side. I start seeing these shiny objects and start chasing those shiny objects. And you come to realize, and this only comes with wisdom and from chasing shiny objects. And this is something you could tell somebody in their 20s 100 times and they will still chase the shiny object. But I came to realize the grass isn't greener; it's fake grass, right? Or it just looks greener, but it's really crabgrass. It takes a shitload of watering and a lot of time and attention in order to get it to where it actually feels soft and nice, and you want to walk on it. And so, this is one of those experiences. Again, another big constraint in my life. I'd rather it happen when I'm 25 than when I'm 35 or 45 or 55, though. And quickly realized that the grass isn't greener. And so I sold my real estate other than my primary residence, but I sold the other 9 houses. I only had my primary residence. I chased that shiny object for 2 years. It was a network marketing company. And I thought I could build a big residual income and not have the overhead or risk or any of those things. And it didn't shake out the way that I had hoped. And it wasn't from lack of effort. It was just a bad vehicle. And so for me, I ended up finding myself with $80 in my bank account in August of 2012. I'm 27 at this time, and $25,000 in credit card debt. And I didn't have enough money to make the minimum payments on my credit card. And I was buying peanut butter and eating peanut butter as my meal for lunch and breakfast and dinner, right? And because that gave me the most calories, the most fat, and was the lowest price point. And so it was like doing things like that. I was literally selling like side tables in my house on Craigslist for $5, $10, $15 in order to try to get any money to come in so that way I could pay for my living expenses. Because I, again, had chased these shiny objects and got rid of what was working in order to try to find something new. And what saved me was I sold my home and I moved back to Cleveland, Ohio. And so when I sold my home, that piece of real estate saved my butt. And I was able to sell that. I had $50,000 of equity built up in that home, sold the home, put $50,000 in my bank account, paid down 25 grand of credit card debt, paid back some short-term loans, and pressed the reset button. Moved back in with my parents at the age of 27, which is a very humbling thing after you've been financially free, and decided to get back into real estate because that's what worked in the first place. And this is like the bottom of the market. So I was able to then go start buying things with other people's money. I met people in that other business and with that other industry, and I learned a ton. I don't want to say that I didn't learn a ton, because I absolutely did learn so much, and so many entrepreneurial principles from that other business. It wasn't the right vehicle for me. And so by me being able to take those entrepreneurial insights and those connections, and then roll it into real estate is what really laid the foundation for me to then go and start buying up more single family. And in Cleveland, I talk like I started doing a lot in a short amount of time. The reality is, in Cleveland in 2012, you could buy houses in C and D class areas for like $10,000 to $15,000 that were already rented for $600 a month, right? So they were horrible, tough areas, right, to invest in, kind of war zones. But you could do what seemingly seemed like a lot with a very little amount of money. And I had some people who invested a few $100,000 initially, and then over the course of a couple of years, that ended up turning into $1 million of private money, and that allowed me to start buying apartment buildings and scaling a portfolio of over 100 doors in the span of a couple of years. And then that partnership with a couple of guys who brought the private money, I had an exclusive partnership with them, where they owned 67% of that entire portfolio. I did all the work and I only owned 33%. So that's another lesson, is like, people get so focused on how much equity do I get?
Yeah.
Dude, it's not about this deal. It's about, what does this deal set you up to do in the future, right?
Yep.
If this deal allows you to do 10 more deals, then who cares about the equity in this deal? Because it gives you the balance sheet, it gives you the experience, it gives you the expertise, it gives you the confidence to then go and raise money and take down and get a seat at the table to negotiate and make offers on all these future deals that you can make a lot more money on or have more equity on, because you've sacrificed on deal one in order to see the long-term play. And I think that's a really important piece, where people are like, I want to own 100% of my business. And there's some people who have success doing that, and that's fantastic, but you'll always be constrained if you're not willing to give up equity to either your investors or partners and that side of things. And if you think about Elon Musk only owns 22% of Tesla, and he's the wealthiest person in the world. Jeff Bezos only owns 11% of Amazon.
Yeah.
And he's the wealthiest person, and he got cut in half, right? So I don't even know if he owns 11%. I think he owns 5.5%, because his wife owns the other half. Yeah. And he's still the second wealthiest person in the world, right? So like, you don't need that much equity if you understand the long-term vision and the growth concept that can come with giving up some equity in order to bring on investors, giving up some equity in order to attract A players, giving up some equity in order to do, some sort of profit share to your team. And so I was never that greedy. I always saw the long-term play in a lot of things, and it allowed me to, again, gave up a lot of equity in that first 100 plus doors that I built. And then we liquidated it, and I'm pressing the reset button again.
Yes.
But I had the experience, I had the connections, I had the know-how. I learned on their time and on their dime, and I didn't take that for granted. And it allowed me to then, boom, in 2015, take down an 80-unit apartment complex. By the end of 2016, I had about 200 doors. And by the end of 2017, I was at about 450 doors. By the end of 2018, I picked up another 1,000 doors in 2018. So I was at 1,300 or 1,400 doors. 2019, I picked up another 2,000 doors. So I was at 3,400 doors, right? And so this compound effect, right, of being bad at business from 2007 to 2015 for 8 years of being bad at business, finally started taking grip and having this compound effect. By 2020, I had 3,300 doors, and then kept on accumulating. I got up to about 4,800 doors was the most I ever owned at one time. And you think like, oh, there's all these like graduated steps. I started out as a broker, and then wholesaling, and then flipping, and then buying and holding single family, and then buying and holding small multifamily. And now I'm doing these large commercial deals. Now the next step of growth for me is refining and actually getting rid of a lot of properties that are management intensive, that have business partners or joint venture partners that are not now carrying their weight. And a lot of those, well, Tim, if you just didn't do those deals in the first place, you wouldn't have to deal with that. Yeah, well, they were stepping stones to get to where I am. And now I can refine. And if you only wait for home runs, you're just going to strike out. You're going to be swinging for the fences. You're going to have way more strikeouts. And there's no chance I'd be where I am today if I didn't do some C-class deals, if I didn't do some smaller deals, if I didn't do some joint venture deals with other operating partners, and learned a lot on the way. And so would I have done it differently? I don't know if I would have, because I don't know if it would have gotten me to where I am today. Are there things I wish I knew earlier on? Yes, of course, but I wouldn't change it.
Absolutely. So thinking about that, and I love how you kind of gave, where you were to where you're at. And yeah, I mean, that's a hockey stick growth, right? I mean, in 6 years to go from liquidating an entire, 100 units to then, to 4,800 units, and now different mindset and, adjustment of the business model. But I think when people hear that, one thing they're going to want to know about is, well, how do you scale that, right? How is that scalable for you to go from 100 to 4,800 in a short time frame? How do you have capacity for that? And I know earlier you mentioned hiring people on your team, so I want you to talk about that. But the second part is Usain Bolt has this line where he was interviewed after winning the Olympics, and they go, isn't that amazing that it took you 9 seconds to win, or whatever, 9 point, however many? He goes, well, I trained 4 years for those 9 seconds. And you think about your journey and you say, gosh, I mean, it took 8 years of, learning and different experiences to get to where you're at today. Well, 15, 18 years in total, right? But specifically on the investing side, a little bit shorter time frame. But what does that mean for the hockey stick for you from where you're at now to 10 years from now too? So talk a little bit about those two different dynamics.
Yeah, so we talk about hockey stick growth, and I use that as an analogy too. And as you're talking about it, I'm like, you know what it actually is? It's an inverted hockey stick. It's not, it's not the part you hit the puck with on the ground and then it goes exponential. Yeah. No, the handle was on the ground for a very long time, and then I finally went like this.
Yeah.
The part that you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's what you got to, but here's the thing, real estate's not an experiment, right? Like I understood that. And so I always had this long-term perspective. And I think if you have the long-term perspective, you don't let the highs and lows, and dude, they always affect you a little bit, but they affected me less when I kept a long-term perspective, right? I didn't get too high. I didn't when things were good, right? Because I was like, I'm not counting my money until it actually hits the bank, right? And by the time it hit the bank, I was already past the excitement phase, onto the next deal, kind of a thing. Yeah. So, dude, maybe that's something I should have stepped back and paid a little bit more attention to and celebrated some of those wins. But when you're just paying attention to the long-term phase, I didn't get as high, but I also didn't get as low, right? I didn't let a buyer that didn't perform, it fell out, and a deal comes back in the market. Like, dude, that happens all the time. I never celebrate those wins too early. And so it's like, how do you stop from on the emotional roller coaster of real estate or emotional roller coaster of entrepreneurship? How do you stop from flying off the roller coaster? Well, you keep the bar down, right? You keep it in front. And so you keep the bar down by having a long-term mindset, a long-term outlook of where this is going to go over the next 10 years. And if you're thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the road, then the little bumps and things don't get in your way, because you're looking too far down the path, way farther down the path than letting those little things affect you. So that's one thing that I would say. Yeah. As far as like the growth, how did that happen? Yeah. I would attribute it to two things. And the first would be mentorship. And I joined a mastermind in 2015. Okay. And that mastermind, if you're not familiar with what a mastermind, like go read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. He talks about a mastermind. A mastermind is essentially when at least two or more people get in a room together and they brainstorm ideas and strategies and concepts and visions to the point where it creates this new third mind, a mastermind that can problem solve and be resourceful enough to break through any sort of struggles and barriers and bottlenecks that you might face. And God willing, you have more than two people in that room. And my first mastermind was about 15 people in a room, and we just went around the table talking about struggles and things that we were facing and successes and things that worked for some people that they would have done again, or things that they would have done differently. And that we were able to troubleshoot everybody's problems that were these huge bottlenecks in our own brains, and able to easily solve them and punch through any glass ceilings and stuff that they might be facing. And joining a mastermind, which is pay to play, right? It was $30,000 to join that mastermind. Yes. And that was in 2015. In 2014 was the first year I ever made six figures, made 130 grand. I joined that I attended that mastermind in February, and I implemented what they told me to do starting in March, which is hire an assistant and a couple other things. And over the next 10 months of 2015, I tripled my income from the year before, right? Somebody might say, dude, $30,000 is a lot of money to invest.
Yeah.
Well, if you can make an extra, like I made 400 grand that year. I made an extra $260,000. So $30,000 invested for essentially a 10x multiple is a pretty good ROI. And I understood the importance of investing in yourself and investing in relationships and relationship capital, right? And from the people that I met through that mastermind, from the insights I got from that mastermind, it directly correlated to my net worth and my income growing exponentially and my growth happening because I had this board of advisors that I meet with essentially every quarter that can help me troubleshoot any problems that I was facing. And that was so tremendously impactful that it allowed me to, again, have that hockey stick growth. And part of that was having access to resources, having access to connections, having access to people who could then advise me on how to grow a team. And the team thing was what allowed me to grow because what do they say? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go as a team.
Yeah.
And again, having a long-term mindset, I've always naturally talked about where we were going. Here's all the struggles right now, but here's where we're going. Here's where I see this going to. And that allowed me to attract players of the team who I didn't have to sell them on, hey, I couldn't sell them, right? Because we didn't have a lot going on at the time, but I could tell them, here's where we're going to go, right? Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to accomplish. Here's how we're going to make an impact. And that allowed me to paint the long-term vision to attract players who were willing to sacrifice and go through the hard times and the growth with me early on. And now guess what? Now they're partners in my company. Now they have equity. Now they have incomes that are in the top 1/10 of 1% and net worths in the top 1/10 of 1% because they believed in me early on. And I was able to paint them. I wouldn't have attracted them if I couldn't paint the long-term vision. So I've always had that long-term vision. And I've always talked about, here's the struggle right now. Here's what we're dealing with right now. But guys, I promise you, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we're going to get to this, and we're going to get to that. And there's always growth, and there's always struggles. And each level that you hit is another level of problems and struggles and headaches. But now we have this like cohesive force where our arms are linked. And, you know, when there's a half dozen of you running through brick walls, you can accomplish anything.
Well, I love that. And I love how it parlays into what you said earlier, you know, and at different phases of your life, what you give up to learn is different, right? In your teens and 20s, you might be giving up your time to learn because you're not going to get compensated for it. And later in life, it may not be that somebody needs, you know, a 30-year-old intern, right? But hey, if you pay to be in this room, then you can learn that way. And so there is that, you know, cost benefit analysis where, hey, if I'm willing to give you, you know, 10 hours of my time a week so I can get mentored by you and help you, well, I'm going to learn that way. Or down the road, hey, maybe they don't want my free help, but if I pay $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, they'll say, yeah, you can come learn and you can come be a part of these conversations. And so that's important to realize as well.
For sure. For sure. And there's things that people don't even like, oh, well, I'm just paying paying $30,000. $30,000 does not change that mentor's life. Right. It did not change that guy's life. You know whose life it changed? My life. Yes. You know why? Because I knew that if I write a check for $30,000, I want to get my $30,000 back. I want to get a return on my $30,000. So I showed up as a more serious student. Mm-hmm. The other thing is I had to go through some sort of personal, I actually got drunk before I wired this guy money because I wasn't confident enough. And when you get to a level where you're willing to invest $30,000 in yourself because you're confident enough that you can do something with that information and the insights and the resources and the connections that you're going to make from investing $30,000, dude, that's powerful. Yeah. To believe enough in yourself to write a check for $30,000, dude, like that then transforms me and how I show up to meetings better and how I show up to my team better and how I show up to my relationships better. And imagine now being in a room of 20 people who all believe enough in themselves and their ability to make things happen, where everybody invested $30,000 to be in that room. Like, can you imagine what can be accomplished? It's a powerful, powerful position. And not only that, but the $30,000 also keeps everybody out who's not willing to spend that money, who doesn't believe. So it expedites the relation. Like how many how many networking events, free networking events do you have to go to in order to find 20 badasses like that in a room? You got to
Yes.
go to infinite friggin'
Yep.
free networking events versus dropping a check and you just pay to get proximity of those people. And then boom, they make an introduction for you to
Yep.
somebody that does hard money lending for them that took them 15 years to develop that relationship. And they do an email introduction, and all of a sudden you instantaneously have access to somebody that took them 15 years to develop. Like, that is how you expedite time. That's how you expedite success. If there's one principle or one idea that shortcuts success, that's the only one. It's
Yes.
paying to be in the room, because you can very tangibly see how you can expedite timelines by doing that. You know who I don't make introductions to is somebody who's begging for free and not willing to invest in themselves, or not willing to pay to play because they don't have the level of confidence. And I don't know if they're going to take that information, take that connection, and waste everybody's time, or
Yep.
actually put it to good use. But if you're investing in yourself, that's the differentiator for me and for a lot of other people who operate at a big level, is
Yep.
they know that you're a serious student if you're willing to invest in yourself, right? They know that you're confident. They know that you're willing to, or that you're willing to do the work because you want to see
Yeah.
a return on your investment. And they know that you will do something if you make that introduction, you make that connection. So if you want to differentiate yourself, dude, pay to be in the room.
I love it. Well, Tim, I want to say thank you so much for your time and sharing your story and just all the pivotal moments that have led to where you're at. And yeah, you just got to promise me that we'll do this again here in 3 or 5 years, and we'll look at where the business has grown to and how you've scaled it, and all the amazing things you're continuing to do.
It's exciting, man. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate all the value that you're putting out there, and thank you for having me on the podcast. And if there's anything that I can do to support you or support your listeners, don't hesitate to reach out on social media. I'm always putting free content out there and trying to just help people with personal finance, with entrepreneurship, with lifestyle design, and pay it forward. There are a lot of people who poured into me and helped me, and so if I can convey that and again pay it forward, I'd love to do so. So appreciate you again for having me, Phil.